Hello and welcome. Today, we're diving deep into a truly transformative period in Indian history. We're talking about an era of incredible growth in art, science, and politics. This is the story of the Gupta Empire, an age so brilliant, it's often called India's Golden Age.
But let's stop for a second. What does that term golden age really even mean? Is it just about winning battles and conquering land? Is it a boom in art and culture, a thriving economy? Or is it maybe all of those things combined? Well, that's what we're here to find out. Together, we're going to investigate what made this particular era so special.
So, here's our game plan. First, we'll look at how the empire got started. Then, we'll meet its most famous ruler, a real legend. We'll unpack his brilliant strategy of using diplomacy, not just armies. After that, we'll witness a total revolution in architecture, see what daily life was like through a traveler's eyes, and finally, we'll size up the empire's incredible, lasting legacy.
All right, let's set the stage. We're talking about the Gupta Empire, which flourished from about 320 to 550 CE. For the first time in a while, a huge part of the Indian subcontinent was united under one rule. And that kind of political stability, well, it created the perfect conditions for an explosion of culture, science, and ideas that would go on to shape India for centuries.
Now, the empire really hit its peak under one particular man, an emperor whose name became the stuff of legend. So let's zoom in on his time on the throne, because this is where we meet the son of valor himself, Chandragupta II. See, Chandragupta II wasn't just another king, he was an icon. He took on this incredible title, Vikramaditya, which means the son of valor. And that wasn't just a cool nickname, it was a statement. It was a brand, really, that broadcast the power and brilliance of his entire empire. And check this out, we have physical proof that connects the historical ruler to the legend. On the left, you've got his name, Chandra, stamped on one of his gold coins. And on the right, that exact same name is carved into the famous Iron Pillar of Delhi. The pillar talks about the amazing victories of a king named Chandra, and pretty much all scholars agree this is our guy, Chandragupta II. This link basically cements his status as a near-mythical hero.
And his military record? It was seriously impressive. This timeline just gives you a taste of his ambition. He pushed into central India. Then, in a huge move, he conquered the western Kshatrapas, or Sakas. And this was a massive deal because it gave the empire a direct coastline on the Arabian Sea, opening up all kinds of trade. But he didn't stop there. That same Iron Pillar tells us he won battles way over in Bengal and even crossed the Indus River into modern-day Afghanistan. This empire was built on some serious military muscle.
But here's the thing. Brute force was only half the story. Chandragupta was a master strategist. He knew you couldn't hold a massive empire together just with swords. He had another weapon, a much smarter one. Diplomacy.
He played chess while others were playing checkers, using marriage alliances to lock down his power. He himself married Queen Kubaramada, and boom, the powerful Naga dynasty was on his side. Then, he did something even more brilliant. He married his daughter, Prabhavati Gupta, to the king of the Varkatakas. When her husband died, she ruled in his place for 20 years, basically making her kingdom a key Gupta ally. These weren't just weddings, they were genius political moves that grew his empire without spilling a drop of blood.
Okay, so the empire is secure, it's powerful, and that's when the culture really takes off. And you can see it most clearly in their architecture. They left a legacy in stone that would literally define Indian art for 1,000 years. You have to understand, before the Guptas, big religious buildings were mostly made of things that don't last, like wood, brick, and bamboo. And that's why so few of them are still around. The Guptas completely changed the game. They started building with dressed stone, sandstone, granite. This was a huge shift. For the very first time, they could build massive, freestanding Hindu temples that were meant to last forever, turning them into permanent homes for the gods.
And with these permanent materials came a brand new, iconic design feature, the shikara. That's the tall, curved spire you see on top of temples. Now, this wasn't just for decoration, it was full of meaning. The shikara represents the mythical Mount Meru, the center of the universe, and it symbolizes a person's spiritual journey upward to connect with the divine. This one feature would become the absolute hallmark of North Indian temples.
Now, for anybody studying for exams, this slide is gold. You can actually see the evolution of their temples in 5 clear stages. It starts out pretty simple, just a square, flat-roofed building. Then, in stage 2, they add a covered walkway around the main shrine. Stage 3 experiments with a different shape, a rectangular one with a barrel-vaulted roof.
And then, the big leap, stage 4 is when they add the shikhara. Finally, you get some rare experiments with circular shapes. This step-by-step progress literally created the blueprint for Hindu temples for centuries to come. And if you want to see a perfect example of this breakthrough, look no further than the Dashavatara temple at Deogarh. It's one of the first temples we know of that has a shikhara. You can see all the pieces coming together here. The tall spire, the main square shrine, and these incredible carved panels that tell the stories of the god Vishnu. It's a true masterpiece, a perfect blend of art, engineering, and faith.
So, we've seen the military power and the artistic genius. But what was it actually like to live in the Gupta Empire? Lucky for us, we have an eyewitness account from a foreign traveler who saw it all firsthand. This quote is from Foxian, a Buddhist pilgrim from China who journeyed through India right at the height of Chandragupta II's reign. And his description is just incredible. He says the people are numerous and happy. And get this, the king governs without decapitation or other corporal punishments. Instead, criminals were just fined. For that time in history, that is remarkably progressive.
And Faxian's journals give us even more amazing little details. For instance, people didn't have to register their homes with the government, which suggests a lot of personal freedom. He saw people using cowrie shells as everyday money. And, just amazingly, he wrote that cities had charitable houses that gave out free medical care to the poor. What he describes is a society with freedom, safety, and a real sense of social welfare.
So you might be wondering, how did they pay for all this? Well, a huge part of the economic engine was a system called Devadana. This was a genius idea. The government would grant huge plots of land to temples, tax-free. This turned the temples into powerful economic hubs. They would manage the farms, collect the revenue, and use that money to fund big community projects, like irrigation systems and the very hospitals that Foxian saw. It was a perfect marriage of faith and finance.
So, when you put it all together, what's the final verdict? What did the Guptas really leave behind? Let's zoom out one last time and look at their long-term impact, because they truly laid the foundations for what would become medieval India.
The legacy is just immense. Politically, they created a model for a huge, stable empire that future kings would try to copy. Architecturally, they literally wrote the rulebook for temple design. Economically, their system of using temples as community centers lasted for centuries. And culturally? Well, the court of Chandragupta II is said to have been home to the 9 gems, legendary scholars, including the great poet Kalidasa. The king himself, as Vikramaditya, became the perfect ideal of what a king should be in Indian stories for generations.
So the Gupta Empire really did answer that question of what makes a golden age. It's a mix of military strength, smart diplomacy, economic innovation, and a cultural vision so powerful it gets carved into stone. Their legacy is clear. You can still see it and touch it today. Which leaves us with one last thing to think about. They built a legacy in stone. What will our era's legacy be?